Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to talk with you today and have you hear from our panelists. This is our Trellis Strategies 360 Solutions Summit. This series that we've been hosting since last November has covered reasons why students and learners do not continue with their post-secondary education. Our first topic was who pauses their education and why, and we discussed data about the different populations who are not continuing or stopping out. Our next discussion was trust, expectations, and outcomes of post-secondary education. Our third discussion was student-ready institutions, processes, and programs. And our last discussion in January was who doesn't start post-secondary education. Oh, the first one was who pauses. The last one was who doesn't start and why. Now, here we are in February. We are wrapping up all of these and talking about solutions to helping students work through those obstacles and continue their post-secondary education. I'm so excited to turn the hosting role over to Dr. Debra Chromy, our President and CEO of Trellis Strategies.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, Andrea, for not only pulling together the panelists and the program for today, but the entire year-long program. Andrea has been fantastic. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Trellis 360 Solutions Summit. My name is Debra Chromy. I am President and CEO at Trellis Strategies, based here in Round Rock, Texas, and I'm so pleased that you all have chosen to join us this afternoon for a series of discussions. For those of you who are first-timers, the Trellis 360 series was started as Andrea mentioned actually last year to bring together industry leaders for thought-provoking discussions on today's higher education and workforce landscape issues. Our first series focused on the value of post-secondary education and was so well received, we started our second series, which is barriers to completion. Our goal with these sessions is that participants gain invaluable insights, share in the discussion, and network with like-minded professionals. I'm excited for today's Solutions Summit, which wraps up, as Andrea mentioned, our second series on barriers to completion. We have three separate panels this afternoon, so I'm hoping that you can join us for all three. But again, happy to have you here for this first one on a very timely topic. I don't know that we knew how timely it was going to be when we first planned this, but it's on overcoming FAFSA obstacles. And we have two great panelists today, Belinda Peña, who is Associate Director of Financial Aid and Veterans Outreach at Austin Community College. Belinda brings a decade of experience to her work with students and their families through the financial aid and enrollment process. She oversees outreach and communication efforts to ensure both current and prospective students receive essential financial aid information and support. And I'm pretty sure Belinda has been very, very busy over the last couple of months. Our other panelist is Gilbert Zavala, who is Vice President of Education and Talent Development at Opportunity Austin. Gilbert oversees school district and higher education partnerships to execute Opportunity Austin's education talent development strategies across the greater Austin area, and also advocates for federal and state policy priorities to improve education attainment and talent development for Central Texas. And I have been in DC on a couple of different visits with Gilbert, and I can say he is a very strong advocate for families and for students. So I'm happy to have you both with us today. I'm going to engage initially in a discussion with our two panelists. And then I will open it up for questions from all of you. So be thinking about those. You can also put questions as you're going along in the chat. Andrea will monitor those and bring those forward when we get to the Q&A section. So let's kick things right off. And I'm going to start with you, Belinda. So let's talk a little about the FAFSA this year and how it is different this year than in past. And if you could speak to both new students and returning students and what they're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as many of us know, FAFSA simplification has been around and it's fully kind of realized this year with a complete redesign of the FAFSA application. So, this experience is going to be really different for students if they're used to the FAFSA even looking a certain way when they apply. So, for any returning students, the way the application looks is completely different. And then for any new students, they're going to do different processes that maybe a prior student wouldn't have to do before. So with that application interface, there's reduction in questions, there's minimization of entering manual income data. So that's been really helpful. But there's also some challenges that we've seen. So students do have to create their own FSA ID, of course, like normal years, but their contributors also have to create that FSA ID. So that's posed some challenges for some families, particularly students with undocumented parents. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk through that as well. But yeah, also some confusion that we've seen around some of the new questions that have been added to the FAFSA application. So when it comes to those new students, maybe they might not realize all of the changes, but of course, our returning students are going to see a totally different application that has been revamped, but does pose a little bit of challenges that we've been seeing.
I mean, Belinda hit the majors, but I would say, a big thing is the delayed start in January versus October. And the decline we've seen, slight decline, maybe less than other regions. We had 3,900 filings, FAFSA filings back in October of 2022. And looking at filings now, we're down marginally about 600. So could be worse, but I think that's part of the trepidation folks feel in engaging with a new process and learning that FAFSA simplification turned out to be not so simple. With major changes come minor glitches that can really be a headache for families and students as they're navigating the process. But I have to say that Trellis has been a great partner in this work, that ACC and our other higher ed institutions have been great partners. So when we run into a complication and we're working with families, they've been a great resource to kind of help navigate those little technical glitches. And, our work is really to try to get additional capacity into the high schools to augment with our business community, nonprofit, college access volunteers to get them into the schools. So really, it's getting folks trained up on the changes and making sure that they're able to walk families through the little hiccups that are coming. But all in all, we were very supportive. Debra, as you hinted, on FAFSA simplification and advocacy at the federal level. This is a good thing. But like all good things and new things, it's just going to take some adjustment. I mean, we've gone from over 100 questions on the 23-24 FAFSA to just a little under 50, with some students, special student populations, being able to navigate the form with even fewer questions than that. So it's a good thing overall, but just a little bumps in the road here and there.
So Gilbert, do you think come next year, it'll be a much smoother process as we've worked out these sort of kinks?
I think that's what I'm hoping. I mean, part of this is sort of building the plane while it's flying. That glitch with the failure to link the SIA calculation to inflation that they're trying to resolve, the glitch on not being able to submit corrections like you normally can, and just log back in and fix it. I do worry that that's going to cause some verification backlogs for institutions and the department, but I do think that once we're back on the normal schedule and we know what the glitches are, right, because that's what we're dealing with now, the department will be able to roll out the 25-26 FAFSA much more efficiently.
Right. And I guess I'd like to ask this question. Given that the glitches, and we know sometimes, and I think, Belinda, you know this from an enrollment perspective, anytime anything gets a little harder than people expect, we lose people out of that enrollment funnel, right? I just want to check in and see what the two of you are seeing. Are we losing any people through the process because of these little glitches you mentioned in the FAFSA?
Yeah, I do want to jump in on this one. So I wouldn't say it's a complete loss, but we're super mindful of that disengagement that students have because of the different pauses that we're having to face for students that are unable to continue. So, for example, some of the students that we work with aren't able to move past the contributor requirement because their parents do not have a social. So that's basically like a standstill. And we know we have the potential to completely lose those students if we don't find a solution to help them through it. So one of the things that we're doing is going to document any students that we know are going to need that follow-up in March when there are hopefully better solutions available for those students to be able to complete. So I wouldn't say it's a complete loss, but we have the potential to lose a lot of students if we're not staying proactive with our outreach and keeping in contact with those students that we know are facing harder challenges and other students that may have had a more breezy experience. And really just to kind of add to that other question as well about, do we think that next year will be better? Absolutely. I think the potential for this application is to be easier for everyone is there, but this is kind of like our trial period, and we're seeing all those hiccups kind of have potential again to lose students, and we're going to try to be proactive in keeping their engagement.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. And Gilbert, what about you from the populations you're all working with? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'd echo those remarks. I think part of it is trying to get through the process with as many families as we can. I can say on a normal year, we're able to get through about 60 to 70% completion. And I think that this year, because of the FSA introduction kind of being, or the FSA, before you used to be able to start the FAFSA, right? Without the FSA, be able to sign off with the FSA ID at the end. Now they've front loaded that. And so a lot of folks have difficulty moving past that. So I do feel like if we can get as many past that and get at least into the student section where the parent might have a little bit more complication if they lack an SSN or haven't done the process before or had an FSA ID filed FAFSA previously for another college student and just lost all their information, having to recover that. I do think we have some attrition, but we do our best to try to make it through. And I do have to say, early on, ACC, and I think through NASFA and NCAN, we had a form workaround for folks that were getting caught without a case number or without being able to advance through the FSA ID set up and distributed attestation forms, which is basically you send a separate document to the department and that lets you set up your FSA ID, lets them verify, and the student can move forward. It's really about trying to find workarounds when we run into complications to reduce the attrition that we would have of folks not moving through the process.
Right. And Belinda, there was a clarifying question that came in. When you say outreach, your office is going to contact currently enrolled students who had FAFSA this year to ensure they are filled out for the next academic year?
Yeah. So both current students and also prospective students that are attending our event. So for our current students, we have a standard communication that we send, letting them know that the FAFSA is available to complete and inviting them to attend workshops that we're hosting throughout the district to get support. So they're part of kind of standardized communication that we send to our current students. For our prospective students that end up coming to our events, we're also keeping their contact information so we know to follow up with them and help them through that process if they're not able to complete their application.
Great. And I do want to ask both of you, I mean, a lot of this has been in the news, right? And I don't know, maybe we're hyper sensitive to it because we know about the issue, but have you had any families or students coming to you, they've read things in the news and they're concerned about it, or is it just not hitting the general population?
I do think that folks are reading the news, and maybe that is causing some trepidation. But I think that's why people come out to our events, right? If they hear something and they want to get questions answered, they know they can come out. There's financial aid officers at events, trained volunteers, school personnel there to help. But I do think that's, what's in the news is in the zeitgeist, and students talk to students and parents talk to parents, and that can cause additional questions and fear about going through the process.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd add from like the current student perspective is that we're not really getting a lot of students coming to us with those questions. And I think it's because of that trepidation. They're just nervous, they're not sure what to do. And it takes a lot to engage students during the spring semester in general. So we have seen lower engagement and responses to our emails. But what we try to do to be proactive is we send an email whenever there are updates to the process. So for example, whenever we learned that receiving the ICERs would be delayed, we sent an email to all of our current students letting them know that this is happening, where to find more information, and really just to be reassuring and let them know that at this point, that's not going to significantly impact any of their financial aid for the year. So they can continue to get their financial aid turned in as soon as they can. We've also extended our priority date to May 1st to provide that wiggle room for students so that they have more time to complete it, especially if they're experiencing issues. So just from that current student perspective, we're trying to keep them informed as much as possible, but really haven't seen as many come to us with kind of fear from the news or anything like that. So we're just trying to be proactive about that outreach.
That's great. And while we're on this topic of communication with students and with families, can you each share what you are doing? I mean, you've already shared some of what you're doing, but are there things that you put on your website? Belinda, you mentioned emails, but are other things you put on the website? Do you communicate with the ISDs? Do you have a hotline or a helpline or email or chat features or other things that you do to try and, stay in communication with individuals and families and make sure that if they are nervous or are having concerns, that they know it's safe to reach out to you?
Yeah, I can jump in, and actually it involves Gilbert as well. So this year for connecting with the ISDs, we went ahead and did a joint training called Partners in Aid. So I worked with Gilbert and his team and Trellis to host different training sessions for all of our high school counselors in the fall semester. So that's one way that we are trying to be helpful for our counselors in understanding the changes to the FAFSA and what to expect and how to kind of manage all of the different challenges that they may expect to see. So that's one way that we've been able to keep in contact with our high school counselors. In terms of communication, we did also meet with our marketing and communications team back over the summer in anticipation of needing to have more thoughtful communication for the year. So during October, for example, we did kind of like phase one of our communication to students, which involved a whole host of marketing, letting them know that the FAFSA was going to be delayed until later in the year. Phase two involved letting them know that the FAFSA is available and they can start it and get help from our team. And phase three right now is basically financial aid month. So we have financial aid month going on throughout February, where we're hosting workshops across our district, where students that are currently enrolled at ACC and prospective students can come get support with their application. So we've been extra intentional about our communication this year in anticipation of questions and confusion around the application. And that website has been one of the spaces that we try to centralize all of that communication. And I do want to shout out other schools. We actually knew that this would be very new for us this year. So we've been checking on other schools to see what they're doing. So Alamo Colleges, for example, has a really great website. UT has a really great website. So we're really learning from each other on what we can do so that students stay informed and their families stay informed as well.
That's great. I love the collaboration effort around all of that. How about you, Gilbert? I know that you do some work with the independent school districts and just what activities your organization is taking on to help get the word out.
Yeah. So first, thank you to Belinda for referencing the partnership. That's something that we use to train our business folks, our community orgs, all our partners that are going out into the schools, and we trained over 200 this fall. But in addition, we worked on student and parent info sessions, had a couple hundred also in December. We also use another website. It's called collegeinsight.com to actually allow for registrations and to promote all of our events. So the ACC events are on there. All of the events that we plan with our ISD partners are on there. And folks that are looking to plan events can reach out and we can get that on there. Honestly, the intent here is to amplify all of the help opportunities that are available to parents and students across our region. And, we work very closely with our school partners because families and students know their school. And so all of the events that we host are on campus. They're in libraries, they're in labs, they're in, classrooms. So families are welcome to come out. It's open to anybody. Usually we get mainly the students that are going to that campus, but often from other schools in the surrounding area. And that's all on the website, collegeinsight.com. The other feature on the website is that students can connect and explore scholarships. And this is through a partnership with Red Kite, and it connects them with aid opportunities, sometimes tied directly to the schools that they're planning on attending and enrolling in. But the lines of communication between us and the school districts, between our higher ed partners, are continually open to try to maximize the reach that we have with parents and students.
So would you say, Belinda and Gilbert, you have been particularly, even more so than in the past, proactive in terms of communication, given all this change this year? And the glitches, I like the way you described it, Gilbert, as glitches that are experienced in year one.
Yeah, I would say we've tried to communicate as much as we can, given the changes, and make sure that our volunteers, our partners, our counselors were well prepared based on the information we had from the department. And some of this is a learn as you go, right? When they launched and we started learning about the glitches, we had to think about, okay, well, what do we do here? What's the best course of action to make sure we can get as many families or students through the process? And it's really been, through these networks with ACC, with NASPA, with NCAN, with other groups that are in the space, counselors working to resolve specific or complicated student issues. You got to keep the lines of communication open.
Definitely. I totally agree with that. Learning as you go and keeping the lines of communication open, because even though this year we have been more intentional about our communication, there's constantly new curveballs that we're being thrown. So we're keeping those lines of communication open and finding solutions internally that can be shared with other community members. So whether you're supporting students with their FAFSA or anything related to that field, we're really trying to resource gather and resource share because we're all learning together.
And to that, I mean, Gilbert, I know you mentioned Department of Education. They are the ultimate source of information. But Belinda, I know that NASPA has offered a tool, going back to, you mentioned collaboration with some local colleges in Texas, but I think this tool takes it beyond just Texas, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so NASPA Communities Slack channel is something that I really recommend. It was introduced to me by a colleague. You basically can jump onto that Slack channel and hear from colleges and financial aid administrators from across the nation that are facing the same challenges and asking the same questions. It's been such an amazing resource. We basically are on it every day to see what questions are being asked, what answers are being shared. And there's a NASPA community manager on there too to share resources and announcements. So as soon as new information is available, it's posted on that NASPA community Slack channel. So if you're not already on it, I definitely recommend, because it's been one of our saving graces in learning information and getting quick answers.
And Gilbert, did I cut you off earlier? I'm sorry.
No, actually, I was going to reference the department, for all the flack they get on the rollout and the glitches. They actually have been pretty responsive in putting out workarounds and solutions. And I think, it's a great resource. And, oftentimes we're calling the hotline during a FAFSA session. And folks are getting through. I know it's, you hear a lot of we're not getting through or getting hung up on, and that can happen. It's a capacity issue, right? But folks do get through, folks do get help. And I would say if you're having trouble, don't give up. Just keep on trying.
Right. And Belinda, we did have a question in the chat as to what the Slack chat is called. Is it just NASPA Slack chat?
Yeah, it's called NASPA Communities.
NASPA Communities. Great. Fabulous. So we've got all that. Let's talk about your staff and your teams. I mean, they're probably fielding the majority of the questions and concerns that are coming in. How do you go about helping them to manage uncertainty and questions from your team members? or even from individuals where we don't have answers, how are you managing that uncertainty, both with your team members as well as how they're able to respond? Because there's nothing worse than saying, that's a great question, I don't have an answer for you. So how are you managing that?
That's a great question. And I think that starts with my own personal reflection on how I manage it to then share with my teams. I've been in financial aid for 10 years, and I haven't felt like I had more questions than answers since the beginning of my time working here. So it's definitely been an internal journey to manage my own uncertainty and figure out how I can be proactive and focus on what can be done, but then transitioning that and making sure my team feels supported and also feels comfortable, just kind of running through that ambiguity together and remembering that we are trying to find solutions together. So fostering a lot of that kind of problem solving and resource sharing. For example, one of our team members yesterday just let me know that every day they check FAFSA news just to kind of resource share back with our team. And I thought that was amazing. And I was like, please keep doing that. That's so helpful for us. Anything you learn, share back. So it's really kind of creating that environment that it's like, we're trying to find solutions together and keep moving.
That's great. How about you, Gilbert?
Same here. I try to tell folks, stay positive. If you don't know the answer, lean on our network. I mean, we're at events with financial aid officers that do this for a living, coordinating board, community orgs, college access orgs, that this is what they're doing. And, when you don't know a particular answer, there's usually someone there that does. And if we don't know it, we'll find it. But I just like to stay positive. So that also helps, the family know, we're going to get an answer to your question. It might not be immediate, but we're going to get an answer to your question to help you move along the process.
And are either of you using chat functionality where you've got some pre-populated questions and responses that maybe take care of, hopefully, the majority of the general questions, and that way your team is able to deal with those that are more probably difficult or challenging, if you will?
We do not, but maybe Belinda.
Yeah, we don't have a chat, unfortunately, but that's where we're using our website kind of like as our central hub. So we're fielding questions and answers and making sure they get updated on our website so we can have those standard solutions posted and available for our staff to reference, for our students to reference, and then also for other people across the district to reference. So that's something that we've made sure to keep as updated as possible as we find out more.
Yeah, and as much as I am a fan of chat, when it comes to me or my child's education, financial aid, I don't know about you, but I want someone to hold my hand and talk me through it and explain it. Is that what you're seeing? Or is that just me?
No, definitely. We're definitely seeing that. At our workshops, for example, people have explicitly said they're coming here because they want help and they wanted to get that troubleshooting assistance one-on-one. So absolutely, especially if they're running into any hiccups, they want that personal touch.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I mean, chat features, even the chat on the FAFSA with the department. I mean, I think it's useful, but a lot of times it may not get to the question the person has, and having that human to human interaction with a financial aid professional, a counselor, someone working that's used to working with the FAFSA form is more helpful and probably also quicker, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder though, first gen, if they've got nobody in their family who's been through this process, they're going through it for the first time. People have described it as more difficult than filing your taxes, right? So that's what they were trying to accomplish by simplifying the FAFSA. But with the glitches this year, it's very confusing versus somebody who has somebody in their family who can help walk them through it. I think that personal, there's no replacement, I think, for that personal interaction, right? And touch.
Yeah.
Especially so you don't lose them through the enrollment funnel as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to I have a couple more questions, but I did want to take a moment to open it up for questions. We've been answering some of the chat ones that have been sort of clarifying questions as we've gone along. But let me open it up and see if there are any other questions out there. you've talked a little bit about this, but what do you think has been your biggest challenge this year? And certainly we know that this is going to go beyond the normal financial aid cycle. You've already talked about pushing your dates out. What do you think is probably the biggest challenge you're facing? And thinking about it not only from the issues that families have, but keeping your staff, feeling positive, engaged, et cetera.
So I think one that comes to mind is learning how to work around the different issues that we're seeing with the FAFSA has been difficult because we have so many team members that are helping with FAFSA. We basically started our own internal space where we share the troubleshooting advice that we have as we learn it. So basically just creating a new space for us to add in what we're learning as we go. So that started off really challenging, but now that we have that central space, it's been really helpful for us to share like, hey, for this particular issue, this is how you can work around it. So that's been nice to be able to communicate with our teams, but it was really challenging at first because we didn't know the answers or how quickly these things would be resolved. And then also just making sure that we're not panicking anyone. So our communication has been very intentional about providing reassurance to students and letting them know we understand and that we're working with them and we will be them along the whole journey, no matter how long it takes, and extending those deadlines so that they have that flexibility to take their time through those hiccups.
Great. Gilbert?
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think the delayed start combined with the glitches and the media coverage maybe causing a little trepidation, folks feeling a little bit more uncertain about the process, and that's impacting, I think, turnout at some of the events. And I say, it's 3,200 versus 3,900 filings in the first week. It's not huge, but you are seeing it there, and there is a difference. And I think, once we get past this, and to Belinda's point, the workarounds are happening as we go, and folks understand they can get through it and continue to stay positive and lean on the network where we run into other complications, because there may be more that we haven't encountered as they're fixing things on the back end. But I think that's, I think Belinda covered most. I do wish we had a December start. Because then this would have been, I think we would have caught on a little earlier, and the department would have had a little bit more runway heading into the March 15th priority aid deadline for Texas.
Yeah, no, agreed. I guess, we're under this guise of the Solution Summit, and you both have provided some great ideas, potential solutions, et cetera. What would be your one, if there was one big takeaway from what you've shared today, what would it be for those that are listening in?
So I think my biggest takeaway is that where our biggest resource is each other. So make sure that you're connecting with other colleges through that NASFA community Slack. It's been so helpful for us to get answers to questions that we have from other people. To Gilbert's point earlier, a lot of people are staying on the phone with FSA for hours to get support. When they get an answer, that's then transferred to the NASFA community. So you don't have to do that legwork. So that's one huge takeaway that I would say. Connecting with your internal and external partners. Gilbert and I have had an open line of communication on any sort of technical issues that we're finding solutions for. And then also just make sure that you're keeping your team looped in as much as possible and creating that environment of, we're going to get through this and there are resources out there and we're all in this together essentially, and we want to help each other.
That's great. Gilbert, what's your one big takeaway?
I'd say there's power in networks and, the collaboration that we have, long-term relationships with our community colleges, long-term relationships with our school districts. There's trust that's built there, the capacity that's given to volunteers that are coming out to the campuses that are trained up to help families, even through this new process. I think that's something that works, that we're seeing work. Even though we're encountering these glitches. So I'd say that power, network, and partnership in this work is critical.
So this is a situation where you don't mind admitting to anybody, can you help me? I don't know. Yeah, raise your hand, all of that. Yes. So we did have one question come in via the Q&A, and it was a question about whether or not, I think this is for you, Belinda, can you expand a bit more on the resources, people, and thoughts in helping out mixed status families during this time? Example is families with parents that do not have a Social Security number.
Yeah, so one main resource that I'd share that actually just came out yesterday, FSA posted guidance on how to support or how to get through the application if your parent does not have a social. So that would be the main space that I would recommend checking out. It's on the FSA website. And then the other thing I would say is, if you can, keep the contact information for those students that are at a standstill so that you can reach out to them proactively in March when we have a little bit more access and they're able to complete that application. And then the last thing I'll say is the FSA ID is really difficult to get through for those students who have parents without Social Security numbers. So one tip that I recommend is using the email feature on FSA because they're able to provide some more information quicker through that email feature. So that's what I would say for those families, but definitely continuing to learn new strategies to help them. Those are just a few things that we're trying to do, but always open to hearing other strategies as well.
Great. And I want to thank Christina Almeida, who just posted the link to that
Awesome.
out there on the chat. So if you want to go to the chat and grab that, that would be really helpful. Thanks, Belinda.
I do have another question as well that came in. How did Opportunity Austin and ACC begin working together to support learners? How did that relationship begin?
Can you ask that one more time?
How did Opportunity Austin and ACC begin working together to support learners?
Oh, well, that's going way back in time. The work around FAFSA actually began with the start of our first economic development strategy for Opportunity Austin. We saw that the majority of jobs in this region were projected to require post-secondary credentials, and that the majority of students in our largest school district, at that time very focused in Austin ISD, were low income. Poverty rates were north of 60%. Back then, that was around the 2006, which is when we started working, and we went from 4 events back then to getting into the national FAFSA pilot in 2010 with the department, and started getting student level data into the districts and deepening the partnership. We're not getting this started the partnership with ACC, with Concordia, with St. Edward's, with UT, with all the IHEs. It's a team effort. But obviously, ACC is our largest local serving community college here for our region, and they've been a partner in this work since it started way back in 2006, and it's scaled from 4 events to almost 50 events annually, with about 6 to 8 training events in partnership with them, with Trellis, with our other community partners. So it's been a long-standing relationship over time.
Thanks, Gilbert. I really want to thank both Belinda and Gilbert very much for being with us today. You two, not only do you work well together, but you have figured out how to focus on having a solution mindset and figuring out how to bring things together. I hope it was helpful to those out there. I know there's at least one person who kept asking questions who I know took some value away from this. I certainly did. I appreciate your time. Thank you both very much. For those who are staying with us, we are going to take a break. You're more than welcome to stay online or come back in, but we're going to take a break and we'll start our next panel at 3:00. Again, thank you, Belinda and Gilbert. Appreciate it very much. And we'll be back in about just shy of 20 minutes.